Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Joe Walsh back with us today. We will chat with Joe in just a second, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So let's get into the big things. Today is July 4th, the 4th of July, Independence Day, as it's also known. And I'm angry because upwards of half of this country are going to be out there today waving the flags, being all patriotic and shit. USA, USA, USA. Celebrating our independence from a king and a monarchy as they dutifully support a king wannabe who wants to turn America into a monarchy.
It appears that many people are willing to simply capitulate, and they're only too happy to be controlled by a dictator.
It's just bizarre. What are you celebrating? What are you patriotically celebrating today as you support this autocratic shit that he's doing to this country?
Well, I think some people want this because we have a large percentage of racists, and they're only too happy to see people of color treated terribly, and women, and any number of minority groups that are just horrifically treated under this administration. So they're going to celebrate that.
Yeah, well, I just hope today, as people are shoving hamburgers and hot dogs in their patriotic faces, that they remember the American Revolution and what it was about and what we broke away from. And think about that as we careen towards the same shit again. All right, the big ugly ass bill passed this week. I'm going to talk about that in my rant, so I don't want to get too deep into it. But one of the interesting things I saw last night was that Donald Trump, in his gloating, said, because the bill passed, I think I have more power now. And that's what we need, right? Donald Trump with more power, or at least feeling more empowered.
He's not wrong. He does have more power. They've just given an enormous increase of budget to his private brown shirt army, ICE. And, they're now funded more than many countries' entire military budgets.
I saw a video yesterday of a family leaving either the courthouse or an immigration office, and the agents tried to rip apart this family, and every one of them was crying. The father, the little kid, maybe 8 years old, and they were finally let go. But until that moment, the abject cruelty and heartlessness that we see on camera, like if you watch that and you don't feel your heart breaking, if you don't get teary-eyed, you're not alive. You're not human. It's like these people truly enjoy the cruelty. They truly enjoy abusing other human beings. And it's just unfathomable, the level of heartlessness of this administration.
If you're the king and you're concentrating power, this is just a small price that the American people have to pay for safety. And he said he was going to do this. He said he was going to keep us safe. And all we have to do is just listen to him and his policies. And, we law-abiding citizens, everything's going to be just fine.
Yeah, and we're not even talking about like the whole due process issue. I mean, there's just so much wrong with it from A to Z.
Where's that messaging? Where is that messaging? Why is this falling so flat with the American public?
Because Donald Trump is a machine gun of corruption and unconstitutional behavior. The barrage of bullets comes at us so quickly that there's just no time to respond to more than just one or two things in a given moment. Then, he just did something new, so let's drop what we were just doing and we got to move on to that thing. That's his evil genius. Trump does something hourly. So by the next moment, there's no time to react. And then what happens? It all just gets normalized. So Jen, I don't know. I mean, There's lots of messaging that needs to be put out there.
Immediately, not like a crafted message from Democrats, like immediately.
Well, it's a combination of factors because it's the 500 times a minute, which is, of course, true. The Washington Post did the analysis of his first administration. I don't know if there was 30,000 lies told. They documented each one of them. But it's also the fact that the media landscape now is so different from any of those other examples that you gave when now corporate media, and most of corporate media, we just saw this with CBS News, is capitulating to him. And essentially, he is blackmailing them because they are all parts of larger corporations. The news parts of them generate no income. They're just a hindrance to them selling to another company that's bigger.
Yeah, well, Paramount just settled because they want to do a merger. And there go CBS and 60 Minutes, and ABC settled. And
because it's part of Disney. It's all big corporate structures.
Yep. And the other thing, too, is that we live in the world of Fox News, which we didn't have 30, 40 years ago. And we have 24-hour cable news. You know, back in the day, if you did something bad, you had the 3 anchors at 6:30. And it would be a big story. And it would last. It had legs. Now they got to fill 24 hours. So you got panels. And when you have panels, you got to have Democrats and you got to have Republicans. And the Republicans sit there and their job is to spin, obfuscate, lie. And that's what they do. And then all of a sudden, after the panel discussion, you had 2 sides telling a story. And then it just becomes a he said, she said, and all that shit gets normalized. And it's just a very, very bad place we're in because people don't trust the news. That's largely coming from Trump because he's turned half of the country against the news. Anyway, to put a punctuation on this, it's a really shitty bill. It gives the bulk of the tax breaks to the rich. The lower income people get virtually nothing, anywhere from 0.05% to maybe a 1.5% tax break. It's going to put anywhere from 12 to 17 million people off of their health insurance through the cuts to Medicaid and cuts to SNAP benefits. And they're putting a ton of money into border security, which is unneeded at this point because there are no border crossings. Donald Trump likes to brag that the day I came into office, we shut that shit down. 5 months later, he's still arguing that there's an invasion, which is why he has to violate the Constitution constantly. There's an invasion. Invasion of who? You shut the border down. There's nobody coming through. Where's the invasion? Who's invading us?
It's cutting out all the green energy in terms of electric vehicles and job creation, and the economy is going to fucking explode. It's not going to explode. It's going to explode in the other direction. That's what's in the bill.
Yeah, we're going to lose an estimated 2 million jobs from green economy jobs that are going to literally be lost or not created.
Yeah. And, he said jump and Republicans said how high. All right, let's move on. The Trump-Musk breakup kicked into high gear yet again this week. Musk really does not like this bill, and he was very vocal about it. He threatened on Twitter any Republican who voted for it will get primaried. He threatened to start a new party. What is it? The America First Party. Mm-hmm. In turn, Donald Trump's rhetoric has been, I may deport you, or I may cut off all your subsidies to all your companies, Starlink, SpaceX, whatever. And he's also claiming, according to the author Michael Wolff, he's claimed to confidants that he's the one who tipped off to the New York Times about Musk's drug use, which is so on brand. That would be, I would bet every nickel I have that that's true, because that is so Trumpian. And so here's the deal. Musk was born in South Africa. He became a U.S. citizen in 2002. But what did Trump do this week? Apparently, he's authorized the Department of Justice to look into denaturalization because he thinks this is his way to get around deporting U.S. citizens. Because if they're doing something against country, right, or if they refuse to testify in Congress, or if they fraudulently filled out their citizenship documents, these are the only reasons that you can denaturalize someone. He said the same thing about New York City mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani, who was born in Uganda but became a U.S. citizen in 2018. Now, this is very, very unlikely to go anywhere because you can't just start deporting U.S. citizens. But it's just awful rhetoric.
Going back to the previous denaturalizations, it just should be pointed out that between 1990 and 2017, the average number of citizens denaturalized was about 11 per year.
Yeah.
That's a pretty damn low number.
Someone said to us, I don't know, last week or the week before, that Donald Trump is using every ounce of energy and government dollars pouring through every law that ever existed in this country to then grab it and use it to justify his bullshit. And you know what? When you pay lawyers enough money, especially if it's not your money, if it's our money as taxpayers, you got a lot of time to find whatever it is you want to find. And that's what they're doing. And then you just tie everything up in the courts.
Add to that when you
Especially
also own the Supreme Court.
Yeah, when you own the Supreme Court, it's like, okay, we know where we're going.
Sure. I mean, you know that how powerful Mamdani is right now if he's going after him in this way. He's truly not just competitive, but he realizes that this young man has a lot of power and sway and can be a real threat to him.
Yeah. Look, when you have a pendulum swing so far to the right, what's naturally going to happen is that the pendulum also swings so far to the left. And that's where the power is in this country. I'm not a progressive, but I'm okay with that because that's 5 million times better to me than the shit we have now. And so what I'm anticipating is that there's a reason for the popularity of people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and Zoran Mamdani. You don't have to agree with everything they do. But they are the polar opposite answer to this autocratic bullshit that we're getting from Donald Trump and Republicans. And he has empowered young people to have a voice. He has re-engaged them. Half of his votes came from young people. That's crazy. Think about what would happen in this country if young people had that kind of turnout in every election, right? Think about it. So for Donald Trump and Republicans to target this guy the way they have, very, very foolish, in my opinion.
Couldn't agree more. And I am a progressive, but I totally agree.
Get out of this studio.
But you're totally right.
Nut.
You're totally right that he represents a change agent. And the fact that he got that many new young voters out should be terrifying to the Republicans and the Democratic establishment because he is the ultimate anti-gerontocracy candidate.
Yeah. He flipped parts of this city that went 8% for Trump, went 13% for him. I mean, Democrats need to sit the fuck down and think about that. Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and ask, how did a 33-year-old Muslim socialist win in New York City, especially with some of the baggage that he carries in a city filled with Jews? Okay, it's just literally as a fact that New York, which is probably the heaviest concentration of Jews in this country, perhaps in the world of any city, elected someone with virtually no experience, 33 years old, Muslim, Democratic Socialist. And he has to get credit for that. He has to get credit for that because he has an incredibly effective message and he is an incredibly effective communicator.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Trump was a fake populist, and these are real populists. Whether you agree with their policies or not, they're genuinely populist policies. And Trump just pretended to have those policies, and that's why there's an overlap. The city does have a very large Jewish population, largest in the country, voting between 12 and 14%. People also have to remember that Mamdani got about 30 to 40% of the Jewish vote.
Yeah.
But also the fact that New York also is home to between 12 and 14% of electorate is Muslim. And they came out obviously strong for a Muslim candidate. So, I mean, I think that the stranglehold that the Jewish portion of the vote has had on the city should be put in context that a Muslim should be electable because we have a very large Muslim population and because not everyone is Islamophobic, thank God.
Yeah, well, look, you saw that Trump gained in the city back in November. And now you have Mamdani winning. Think about this. What's the overlap? They're both representing, in their own way, a very populist segment of the population. And that's where the country is shifting. All right, let's get to our winners and losers.
My winner, China, who is investing in electricity through renewable energy that will power AI, among other things. My loser, Lisa Murkowski and all the lying, cowardly senators who had the ability to stop the Trump beast of a bill.
My winner actually is Mamdani, not only because he is going to win, but also because Trump's attacks on him are really helping him. And my loser is CBS News, because they basically took a blackmail offer and they participated, and they will never recover from that.
My winner, Democrats, who Trump and the GOP with this new budget bill just made it much easier for them to achieve a blue wave in 26. My loser, every congressional Republican, despite knowing just how terrible Trump's big, ugly-ass bill is, who voted for this piece of shit because they're terrified of daddy. And that gets us to the weekly rant. Okay, so as expected, congressional Republicans fell into line and passed Donald Trump's big, ugly-ass bill. As usual, we saw a lot of, quote, agonizing over the measure. As Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski explained after voting for a bill she thought was a total piece of shit, others expressed fundamental disagreement with the budget bill, or very serious concern, or outrage even. They said it deviates from traditional conservative principles of small government, debt reduction, and overall fiscal responsibility. For over a week, many Senate Republicans expressed strong opposition to a bill they knew will raise the debt ceiling to record levels, increase the national debt by $4.4 trillion, while stripping their constituents of critical Medicaid and SNAP benefits. They all knew this draconian bill will cause over 12 million lower-income Americans to lose their health insurance and critical food supplies, that rural hospitals may be forced to close, that all of that will happen just so the rich can get massive tax cuts. And they feared that the bill will come back to haunt them in the 2026 midterms. It was a no-win situation for them. Do the right thing or piss off Trump. To channel my inner Lindsey Graham, oh my, what's a girl to do? They were so torn. Torn, I tell you. Oh, the grueling emotional struggle they faced. Some even stated that they have a conscience and a deep moral center and an understanding of what's right and what's needed by the folks back home. You know, the people who voted for them, but have overwhelmingly voiced opposition to this horrible bill. And when they entered the Senate chamber for the vote Tuesday night, they did exactly what Trump expected them to do. And the bill passed with the tie-breaking help of Vice President J.D. Vance. Just 3 Republicans broke ranks and voted against the bill: Rand Paul, Susan Collins, and Tom Tillis. But not before he had to first announce that he will not be seeking re-election in 2026. This disastrous bill then went back to the House, and House Republicans did the same thing. They passed it too, even though they knew that their original piece of shit was just made even shittier by the Senate. Though a small handful of House Republicans initially held to their convictions and voted against the bill, signaling that the measure was in deep trouble and sending Speaker Mike Johnson into a panic. But then they got a call from the big guy. Dear leader, Daddy. To say he twisted their arm would be a laughably gross understatement. Although I wasn't on any of the calls, I could imagine they went a little something like this.
Listen to me, you disloyal piece of shit. Do you know what I do to worms like you? You're gonna vote for this bill, or I'm gonna rip your balls out of your scrotum, shove them in your mouth, and then pull them out of your ass. And then I'm gonna hand you to Pam Bondi, and you'll end up in El Salvador. Capiche? Great. I knew you'd understand.
Because in 2025 America, this isn't your father's Republican Party. It's not even your older sister's Republican Party. It's the new GOP, the party of Trump, the cult of Trump, where the oath is not to the Constitution, but only to Daddy. So once again, these weak, feckless, spineless, pathetic cowards sold whatever souls they had left and capitulated to the king. And they'll be punished for it in 2026. All right, let's get to Joe Walsh. He is a former Republican congressman from Illinois, elected to Congress in the Tea Party wave of 2010. Following his service in Congress, Walsh became one of the most popular conservative talk radio hosts in the country, syndicated in major markets throughout the U.S. In August of 2019, Joe became a candidate for president of the United States, waging a Republican primary challenge against Donald Trump. Joe is the author of Fuck Silence, calling Trump out for the cultish, moronic, authoritarian con man he is, which was released in February of 2020. Joe is currently the director of The Social Contract and the host of the podcast called The Social Contract with Joe Walsh, where Joe has weekly conversations with other well-known people to model how to have respectful conversations with those you disagree with. Joe comes from the MAGA base and also spends a lot of time engaging respectfully with that base. Joe can be seen regularly on CNN, MSNBC, and News Nation, and has been written up in major publications like the New York Times, Washington Post, The Daily Beast, The Guardian, Raw Story, and Newsweek. Joe Walsh, welcome back into the back room.
Andy, it's always good to be with you, brother.
I actually stand corrected. I should say Democrat Joe Walsh. Welcome back into the back room. Let's talk about that.
When I came out a month ago and said I'm a Democrat, and I explained why, what was your gut reaction?
My gut reaction was kind of the same as it is when I hear a lot of other former Republicans or moderate Republicans. I'm like, duh, like what, okay, like this is not a shock. For years you've been talking like me. I'm a Democrat. You must be a Democrat. Okay, it's just going to be a matter of time before, people like Joe say, all right, I'll embrace it. I'm a Democrat. But forget what I think. I'm curious to get into this more with you.
Yeah.
Because you're not just a former Republican. As you always like to say, you were part of the toxic Tea Party, MAGA mentality. You were a talk show host. You were the Alex Jones of the day. Like for you to be a Democrat now is crazy. But it's not crazy. It's not crazy. So I'm happy to have you join this party. I welcome you into it. I think you've been a great spokesperson in many ways for it for the last several years. But what made you get to this point specifically now?
I didn't want to stop fighting politically. Andy, I left the Republican Party 5 years ago. I've been an independent conservative for the past 5 years, which is where most never Trumpers still are, by the way. Trump wins in November, and then I start really thinking, okay, he won. He won by more than people thought. MAGA is powerful. The Republican Party is powerful. If I want to stay in the game and really fight politically, like I don't want to be a pundit. I don't want to just go on CNN for 4 years and bitch about Trump. If I want to stay on the ground politically, then I have to do more. And that means I have to formally join the party that is the resistance, to help the resistance. That's, Andy, what went through my head for a few months after Trump won. I'll tell you, it's a bizarre fucking evolution, the Tea Party to the Democratic Party. I've got to write that fucking book finally.
You went from the Tea Party to the chamomile tea party.
And you and I could have a show for 5 hours about the Tea Party. I was Tea Party then, and I still am now, because I fear an oppressive government. I fear big tyrannical government. That's what made me Tea Party. I believe in freedom. And now 14, 15 years later, we're seeing tyranny in a political party, the Republican Party. So in a weird way, Andy, we've come full circle. I was scared to death about a king. And it's funny, when I was Tea Party, Obama was president, and I'd yell whenever he signed an executive order, and me and all my Freedom Caucus buddies, we'd all go after him. Well, yeah, right now they're all on board with an actual tyrant.
Yeah, well, we're taping this conversation on the 4th of July, Independence Day. For those of you who may lack some history, Independence Day was in 1776. We signed the Declaration of Independence. It was the Second Constitutional Congress. And we were breaking away from a king and a monarchy. So what's sort of getting me pissed off is knowing that today, perhaps upwards of half of this country are going to be waving flags and being all patriotic and shit, celebrating a day where we broke away from a king and a monarchy, as they are dutifully supporting a wannabe king who wants to turn us into a monarchy. I mean, I can't wrap my head around that.
It's a really weird feeling, Andy, to celebrate Independence Day when the very thing our founders feared sits in the White House. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm having a hard time processing that. And I got no problem because I fucking love this country. I love the revolutionary period.
Me too.
When you and I are really old men, I want to spend the rest of my life just reading about the revolutionary period. But I can say that and say, fuck Trump. I can say I love America, fuck Trump. But it's a weird feeling. I've never had this. I back in the day, I went at Obama hard, but I never questioned the fact that man, in his mind, always had this country's interest at heart. We've never been here with a guy like this.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, I don't think the founding fathers feared someone like Trump, because if they had, they would have better prepared for it. I think the founding fathers just assumed, having broken off from a king and a monarchy, that anyone who would step into this role would follow boundaries and institutions and norms and rules and have, as you say, America's best interest in heart. But what if, like most men who falter here or there, what if they slip and err? Okay, let's plan for that. Okay? The Congress will impeach and convict and blah, blah, blah. I truly don't think they ever, in their wildest imaginations, expected someone like Trump to come along and try to just completely burn the whole house down. Because if they did a bad job planning for that. There are no contingencies for that.
It's an interesting discussion. I think they did fear it. I think they feared tyranny. I think, Andy, a lot of our founding class didn't even want the office of the presidency. Remember, and as you know, and many people know, it took us, a bumpy start to get to the Constitution and the checks and the balances and all of that. And some of our founders believed that every few generations, we might have to relitigate this thing. But to your point, they built a system clearly not strong enough to check a bad man who has does not care at all about the rule of law. That's trouble. We're in real trouble.
Yeah. Give me your top 3 concerns of Trump 2.0, sitting here after the first 6 months of this administration.
He's more popular in this country than the Democrat knows. Way more popular, not just among MAGA. It's always bummed me out that Democrats don't get that. I hope as a new Democrat, I can impress upon my fellow Democrats that this guy connects with people outside of MAGA. Number 2, I know for a fact he believes he's untouchable. I know people close to him who've said privately he does not believe he can be touched. He can do whatever he wants. And number 3, I think he's losing it upstairs. Gave a speech yesterday, again, at another rally after he passed that big, ugly bill, just making mistakes, gaffes that if Joe Biden made, all the media be talking about today is Biden's cognitive decline. And so you add it all up. I worry as to what can stop him. And I believe, Andy, that I believe if he were 20 years younger, there's no fucking doubt he'd say, fuck the Constitution, I'm running again. I don't think he will because of his age. But this thing that is Trumpism is bigger than him.
Yeah, well, when you say nothing can stop him, certainly it's not Republicans in Congress.
Nope.
They've completely abdicated whatever constitutional duty they have. They're not a co-equal branch of government anymore. There are no checks and balances. Trump says jump, and they say how high. The courts, the lower courts seem to be doing a pretty good job. The Supreme Court is kind of like, it's mixed. Like, the way I describe the Supreme Court these days is that it rules in two different buckets. Let's give Trump whatever conservative, semi-autocratic fantasy shit he wants. And then there's another bucket of, we're not going to let him turn this into a dictatorship. So yeah, who's to stop him? And maybe to your point, which is a really interesting way of looking at it, maybe it's just father time, you know? Maybe he's just too old, too tired. You know, if you're 80 years old and you have a choice of going to Mar-a-Lago every weekend and playing golf or fighting a fucking revolution to take down democracy, you know, I have not heard that before. And it's a really interesting way of looking at it, that had he been younger, we might be more fucked. You're right.
Oh, Andy, I'm convinced of that. I think we overlook that. And people, again, close to him believe that if he were, it wouldn't even be a question. He'd stay in that White House as long as he could. I do worry about the midterms in 26, because we've seen in the last couple of months out in LA, and he's targeting blue cities and blue states. He's the one inciting violence. He, again, wants violence on our streets. And I worry that again, will be a pretext towards stopping the midterms if things don't look good for Republicans. Ultimately, Andy, I guess it's us. And that's kind of what our founders also built into the system. It's the people who ultimately have to, I suppose, be the final check. There's great unrest out there. Mm-hmm. The protests have been wonderful, but to what end, I'm not sure yet.
Well, you're raising an interesting point about the midterms, because just this week, we've learned that he has instructed the Department of Justice to look at blue state election officials and to arrest and prosecute anyone who is committing fraud or allowing fraud. And this is not only new terrain, but it is dangerous terrain. Because if you're some person who is an election commissioner, or if you're a secretary of state like Brad Raffensperger, you now have to realize that you can have the long arm of the government's law coming at you for just doing your job. Like, what are these people going to do? They're just running elections on a state and local level. They're not committing any crimes. But the intimidation factor, when you look at universities, when you look at the media, when you look at law firms, it just follows that pattern of more intimidation, which tends to erode in a hungry, turkey-like fashion the democracy that we're fucking celebrating today.
Andy, we've had a good run. And I'm not trying to be light. When I went to Congress 15 years ago, I would ask the question, can America stay together? Will our democracy stay together? The average democracy lasts how long? I think in many ways, again, you know, we've become fat, lazy, and complacent as a people. The hope is that because he's so bad, he's waking us up. The cool thing about Trump, the only cool thing about Trump is because he's so bad, he's forcing us to decide every fucking day in real time what kind of country we want to be. Like, I was always a border hawk. I'm a big legal immigration, though. I want to welcome. This Republican Party doesn't even want legal immigrants here. But being a border hawk sure is one thing. But going after immigrants, disappearing them off of our streets, no due process, grabbing mothers, teenagers, kids, pregnant women. I think, Andy, it's this cruelty that's going to hurt Republicans in 26 more than whatever kind of damage his tariffs or anything else does. It's these images of this cruelty of his immigration enforcement. I think that's going to turn people.
And I think you're right about asking what kind of country we want to be, but I'd like to take it a little further and use you as an example, because we're also being forced now to ask, what kind of person do I want to be? And that sort of dovetails back to the first question about you becoming a Democrat. I hold out hope. Putting aside where we've come as a country, we've been through revolution, we've been through slavery, we've been through the civil rights movement, we've been through wars, we've been through COVID, we've been through all kinds of shit, and we still come out ahead, and we've survived. And I think we will continue to survive. But the reason we continue to survive is because of what you said. It's because of resistance. It's because of people. And you're a perfect example. Like, that Joe Walsh is a Democrat. If for
It's
nothing,
unbelievable.
yeah, but it is something every person in this country every Democrat should focus on, because what it says is that there is hope, that we may not convince everyone in this country to say, you know what, boy, that dude lied to me and he's not serving me, whatever. So I'm leaving MAGA, I'm leaving Trump. But if we can just get a few of those people, and you're living proof of that we still have a citizenry that can think and make the right decision. So that's what I'm banking on, is that there are a lot of Joe Walshes out there who may not have the platform you have, and they're more quiet because we don't know what they're doing, because they're not telling us, but that they're moving in the same direction.
I think you're right. And when I said what kind of country we want to be, I kind of meant what you said. What kind of people do we want to be? And then that is, what kind of person are we each going to be? And Andy, I'm like a reformed MAGA gangbanger. I'm like a recovering alcoholic. And I've taken a really painful journey the last 15 years that I think the American people have to take, most of us, if we want to save this thing. I went from a divisive political asshole to a woke conservative who realized that I want to keep this thing together, who realized that my divisive rhetoric wasn't helping. Now, it took the first election of Trump to fucking wake me up. That was my slap across the face. It woke some people up. My worry, Andy, is that a lot of people voted for Trump in 20, acknowledging that he's an asshole. And yet they wanted it because the Democrats have issues. They wanted it. They chose the asshole over a party they thought was out of touch. Oh, because of the border, because of the price of eggs, whatever. These people are reachable. But that's what's scary. That's what gives me pause, is that, so unlike 16, Andy, in 24, everybody knew what a horrible human being he was. And everybody who voted for him knew that. And yet they still did. That scares me a little bit.
It's terrifying. But, you know, one of the things I struggle with, Joe, that I've struggled with since 16 or even 15 is, do they know who he is? Or when you're just in a Fox, Newsmax, OAN silo, maybe they don't know. So I think a lot of these people just don't know. They're ignorant of truth and reality, and they have a pathological liar who brainwashes them every single day.
I think it's always important to remember, I think there were two kinds of people who voted for Trump. And I was out there every day for Kamala Harris in one battleground state after another. There are those people, his hardcore base, who get disinformation and they believe he won in 2020. Jan 6 was a patriotic day. Many of them know he's an asshole, but they love it. But his hardcore base, Andy, is one thing. And I deal with those folks every day. But there were also what I call the I don't care but Trump supporters. These are the people in Pennsylvania, Andy, who told me, Joe, look, I know Trump's a bad guy, but damn it, we got to control the border. Joe, I know Trump's a bad guy, but my God, Biden was so old, the Democrats are fucked up too. Joe, I know Trump's a bad guy, but eggs, did you see what eggs cost? These people, I think are reachable. These are the people where, if the Democrats get their act together, if Trump's tariffs fuck things up, if Trump's deportations fuck the economy up, these are the people who will bolt him in a heartbeat if the Democrats have something to present.
So I want to ask you along these lines. I want to ask you about what's happening in New York. We have a mayoral election coming up. A 33-year-old Muslim socialist appears to be on the road to victory. And there's a lot that I love about him and his candidacy. I have some issues with some of the things. I don't agree with everything any politician does. But the pendulum has swung so far to the right that it seems the path to victory is for the pendulum to swing far to the left in answer to what Trump and the Republican Party is doing right now. He has a message that's resonating. He's clear, he's concise, he's effective. He is an extremely effective communicator. And Democrats, the leadership, they'd be really smart to listen to not only what he's saying, but how he's winning.
Completely agree. He's not my politics, but we're in the same political party. And I look, I believe the bet I'm making, Andy, as a new Democrat is that the Democrats will embrace me as a conservative Democrat, and that the tent then will be big enough. Because I think we have to have a big Democratic tent to defeat that threat. So I completely embrace what Mamdani's doing, even if I disagree with his politics. Democrats ought to pay attention to him and learn from him the way he's campaigned. The fact that the average Democratic voter out there just wants fucking fighters. Show me you got some fucking spine. Show me you'll stand up against these fucking MAGA dudes and that guy. So he's doing that. AOC's doing that. I wish that, and maybe this is an oxymoron, but I'd love to see a fucking centrist populist fighter. Maybe the only populist fighters are on the far right and the far left. I worry that if the Democrats, if my new party gets tagged with, that's where we are a solidly progressive party. Is that, can you win? I mean, there are people, Andy, who I've had conversations with in the last month who've said, thank you, Joe, for what you've done. I'm glad you're with us, but man, come over here and join the party, because if we can get progressives in this country excited, we don't need centrists. We can win with this. I don't think I agree with that, but I'm my God, there's excitement among progressives.
Well, you know, it's interesting because what you're talking about in a sense is branding and labeling. The flip side to that, and this is why I said if you focus on what he's saying, he's talking about affordability. He's talking about the price of food, the cost of housing, healthcare, all of those things. That's what he's talking about. So if it ends up being not about progressives, but instead the issues that matter to Americans, the way he's energized young people, half of his votes came from young people, and that should make Republicans terrified. But it's his messaging. He's talking about the things that Democrats should be talking about.
Yes, but part of that conversation then is the solutions. He's talking about affordability issues. That's great. The solutions then you're putting forward are what? And he's got to talk about those every bit as much as affordability. I think, Andy, it's going to 2 points. Democrats got to just quit being fucking afraid. And again, he won overwhelmingly this primary in New York City. Celebrate that. Embrace that. I'm a conservative Democrat, and I'm embracing what he did. I wish him the best. Democrats get so afraid of what they say and what they should do. Just fucking embrace him. But the test will be, I don't know, your city, but if Eric Adams, who I can't stand, if they clear the field and it's Adams against Mamdani, turnout was real low in that primary. That could be an interesting close election.
And New York City does have a large Jewish population, and some in the Jewish community have an issue with some of his previous statements and positions, although he did get a good chunk of the Jewish vote in New York. I mean, I'm a Jew. I live in New York. I have issues, but I try not to think of myself as a single-issue voter. I have a problem with single-issue voters. For me personally, the mayor of New York doesn't necessarily get too involved in global politics and foreign policy. There's some spillover in some more micro ways, perhaps, but I'm trying to look at his candidacy in terms of the macro. What did Bernie Sanders say years ago when he ran? Why did AOC get elected? Like, what's happening in the Democratic Party? And they're going to be smart enough to recognize that and then broaden it so that, to your point, it can be some centrism in there too.
Well, that's the important point. And I've been screaming this for years. We're living in a populist moment. What the fuck does that mean? That just means the average American is pissed off because the average American doesn't feel like my government is listening to me or meeting my needs, right? Mm-hmm. Republicans have recognized this populist moment, and they gave us a populist. Donald Trump, he's an evil populist. Democrats have been asleep at the switch. They have not recognized this anger. They have not put forth solutions to this anger. They've not listened to this anger, but Mamdani did. And his victory a few weeks ago, when he won, again, even though I've got issues with some of his issues, I finally screamed and I said, finally, the Democrats now have met this populist moment. And so they're meeting it. They're listening to the anger. I think it's a good thing. AOC has been out there talking to this. If Mamdani wins in November, I'll tell you what, Andy, the second happiest person in the country is going to be AOC, because then she's going to think, well, hell, I can meet this moment. I can run for president in 28.
Every day that Trump does his Trump thing makes it easier for AOC to be president, because that pendulum is swinging. I don't want to sound ageist, but we need new blood and fresh faces. I mean, that's what David Hogg has been trying to do. We need young people. We need more diverse people. I love the fact that he's young. I have a son his age. I love that he's a person of color. I think New York City needs a person of color that's not an Eric Adams, that's not corrupt. But what we're talking about here with Bernie, with AOC, with Mamdani, even with Trump, is what the voters perceive as an authenticity. I think that's why you're popular, because you can get away with a lot. And that's not a pejorative statement. That just means you can do a lot of stuff if the people see you as real. It's hard to imagine, even if the leadership of the Democratic Party is listening to him, it's hard for some of these older guys to embrace it because they're so over-consulted. They're so concerned and afraid, to your point, like, I can't say this, I can't say that. He comes along and he's saying whatever he wants to say because he believes it. And that is why he won, I think.
Andy, I didn't, for a lot of reasons, I didn't last long in Congress, but I always had a difficult time as an elected official because that's the way I was. I would just say what I fucking believed. I'd hold a gazillion town halls. I'd go on every network. I'd get in front of every podcaster. And you ask me a question, Andy, I'm going to fucking answer it. Democrats have been lacking this. Mm-hmm. The Democrats are perceived to be politicians, as you just said, overly consulted, afraid to say, oh my God, what does the poll tell me? Will that resonate? Just fucking say it. Trump gives the illusion that he's authentic. It's easy with Trump because he fucking lies every time he opens his mouth. But Trump is not an overly consulted candidate. My former party has learned from Trump. So they now all lie. They act cruel. They're all pricks. Mamdani hopefully will help teach Democrats to fucking yank your sport coat off, roll your fucking sleeves up, and tell me what you think. Just say what you think. There's a yearning out there for that, Andy.
Yeah, he won in areas in New York City that Trump won by 7, 8, 9 points, and he won by 12, 13 points. I mean, this is something that needs to be studied. But in our last couple of minutes, give me your thoughts on the big ugly-ass bill. That's what I call it.
I love the way you put that, Andy. Look, you know me politically. I'm always about cutting taxes. I'm always about wherever we can make government more efficient and lean. But this is the antithesis of that. Again, what does this bill do? It gives huge tax breaks to the wealthy. It takes health care away from working class Americans. It puts a bullseye on the back of every immigrant in this country. And oh, by the way, it increases the debt by trillions of dollars. Those are the four things this bill does. My God, Andy Ostroy, if we, I always have to catch myself, if we Democrats can't make that fucking case for the next 16 months, the big ugly bill does these four things. Boom, 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 boom. Then we deserve to lose. That's my reaction is it's a huge win for Trump in that it shows how fucking powerful he is. It should be a huge political victory for the Democrats. Andy, I got elected back in 2010 because the Democrats in 2009 passed Obamacare. And when Democrats voted for Obamacare, Andy, they knew it was going to kill them politically in the midterms. Most Republicans privately know that there's going to be a political cost to this thing. They know that. By the way, one of the other differences is those Democrats who knew they were going to lose their seats in 2010, they believed that Obamacare was good for the country. The difference here is none of these Republicans believe this bill is good for the country. But it's going to be up to Democrats, we Democrats, to make that fucking case.
So it's up to the Democrats to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. They're good at that. They're really good. I think they excel at that. Joe, always a pleasure. Again, welcome to the party. We need guys like you. We need voices like you. And do come back again soon.
Love you, Andy. Thank you, my brother.
Take care. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.